Buenas a todos, chavales. Otro viernes más con el Star Citizen Live. Que en este caso, pues nos van a comentar sobre la 314, chicos. Y empieza ya. Empieza ya. Ahí con Top Papi.
But why Dutch?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Star Citizen Live, all about Alpha 314. I'm your host, Jared Huckabee. And if you've never seen Star Citizen Live before, watch another episode, figure out what it's all about. We're just jumping into it this week. We have three esteemed guests, three directors emeritus joining us on the show to discuss all things Alpha 314. Starting immediately to my left, from your perspective, we've got Star Citizen Art Director, Mr. Ian Leland.
Hey everyone. Hey Jared.
Down in the corner, we got Angel Eyes, Star Citizen Live Game Director, Mr. Todd Pappy,
Hello.
and
Nobody puts baby in the corner.
nobody puts baby in the corner. And directly beneath me, the man.
Bueno, pues tenemos aquí a Ian Leland, que es director de arte. John Crew, que tema de naves y tal. Y Todd Papi, light director.
We put a question thread up at the beginning of the week. We collected questions from the Star Citizen backers, let them vote up which questions they wanted to see answered most. We've got a collection of them designed, gathered for our ship people and our gameplay and design people and our environment people, so we can cover quite a lot. Right off the bat, let's start with something for you, Ian, here. Obviously, the volumetric clouds were a big thing. People have been asking about them in just this show almost every single week for the last year and a half, just no matter what the topic was. Are any of the other Stanton planets and moons getting volumetric clouds with this V1 that comes out in Alpha 314?
So the short and disappointing answer is no. But if we break down maybe why, originally, Costin and the team were prototyping on a moon or a smaller planet as a starting off point. But it became clear that we just needed to focus on Crusader itself.
La pregunta sería si... buenas Krim, buenas Locus. La pregunta sería si van a poner 9 volumétricas en el resto de planetas, en la 314. Y está comentando de que no. De que al final, aunque originalmente el diseño de las nubes empezó haciendo en una luna, está comentando que el equipo tenía que centrarse en sacar resultados en Crusader. Así que para la 314 solo vamos a ver esa tech en el planeta Crusader.
Right? Like the occlusion that you'd get from the sun. So there's just a lot of extra stuff that we need to kind of consider. Yeah. So unfortunately, not for 314, but it's something we're looking at for the future.
Claro, en el futuro sí, ¿no? Pero el tema de la oclusión de la luz del sol y demás es algo que tenían que trabajar bastante y no... Y bueno, pues que desafortunadamente ahora no, pero para futuros parches sí lo pondrán en otros planetas, las nubes, ¿no?
That players can choose to help the Ninetales or help Crusader security on either side of this PvP kind of focused or PvP-centric dynamic event. Is that a choice that you get locked into? Or will you be able to change your mind, play both sides, flip back and forth at will? do one time and then do another time? How does that choice actually manifest?
So the choice actually manifests itself based off of if you have a crime stat or not. And so if you have a crime stat, then you'll get the Nine Tails missions. If you don't, then you'll get the Crusader missions. If you get a crime stat while you're in the Crusader missions, then you'll get kicked out, and then you'll be given the option for the Nine Tails missions. And then obviously, if you have a crime stat and you get rid of it during that time, then you should be able to have the Crusader missions.
Para el evento de Night Isles Lockdown, a la hora de escoger un bando, ¿estaremos anclados a él o podremos escoger el bando sobre la marcha, ¿no? Dice que depende si tenemos crime stat o no. Si tenemos criminalidad, pues nos aparecerán misiones de los Nine Tiles, y si no, pues no, misiones del otro bando. Y si queremos que nos aparezcan misiones distintas, pues tendremos que o bien adquirir criminalidad o quitarnos la criminalidad.
Does the Constellation Taurus represent the gold standard for the entire Constellation series of starships?
Short answer, no. So obviously the Taurus has been floating around for a long time. There's been many conspiracy theories about what we've been doing with it, and as I mentioned before in previous Star Citizen lives, it was never going to be like a whole rework of the ships and the lineup. It's simply just spread over that amount of time because it's been a project that we've had on the back burner that we can just put someone on, and when we need to shift priorities, it's the easiest thing that we can pause, move those people on to something else, and then come back to. So it was only ever going to be adding the Taurus to the existing lineup, but that doesn't mean the constellations are all going to stay as they are. That's not the final version of the constellation. So when we get to the gold standard pass for the constellation, then they will all have that pass we are doing currently on the Retaliator, where we're making sure the metrics are correct, making sure the components are in the right place, at the right height for accessibility.
Te está preguntando, ¿la Constellation Taurus va a ser el Gold estándar o para las CONI o todavía no? Dice que no, que de momento pues simplemente han sacado la Constellation para terminar la línea, pero una vez pues más tarde, o sea, en el futuro volverán a revisar las Constellation, y que las Constellation no tienen su forma final y que tendrán que revisar sus métricas como han hecho con la Retaliator, asegurarse de que caben bien todos los componentes, el tema del interior y demás.
That we require. So we did the pilot seat first, which people will see in 314, and then when we do the gold standard pass, we'll touch everything else.
Claro, dice que sí que vamos a ver en la 314 los botones del cockpit. Eso sí lo vamos a ver en la Constellation, ¿no?
Biomes that blend into each other. With Crusader being a gas giant and an entirely new kind of planet, does it have biomes? And if so, what are they and how are they sorted?
Let's see. In the traditional sense, biomes, no. Biome implies like it's a different asset pack. Ties into the flora and fauna that you'd expect there. But one interesting part of the development of Crusaders, one of the things that the tech allowed us to do is to have not a variety of visual design spread horizontally across the planet, but we have a variety of visual design spread vertically through. So on the video last night that went out, people could see a slight glimpse of the variety there. So because it's texture driven, we was able to kind of design a format where, like on the very top, around.
Me está preguntando si Crusader, a pesar de ser un planeta gaseoso, pues tiene biomas, ¿no? Como otros planetas. Y dice que no que es a la extensión, biomas a la extensión de lo que es el planeta, pero se podría considerar que tiene biomas por capas, ¿no? Dependiendo de la altura que estés, pues tienes diferente tipo de formas de ambientación, vamos a decir, ¿no? De estructura de nubes, ¿no?
On the bottom, you can actually get onto like a cavernous space. where you're completely enclosed in cloud, but it feels like you've gone down really, really deep, and then below that it's the hard deck. From there on in, you're just going into clouds, and then that's where will kind of limit the play space. So in a more traditional sense, no, but actually I think yes. And in the future, Todd and I was discussing that we want that to tie into a variety of play space, a variety of gameplay experiences depending on that depth.
It's kind of like a 7-layer dip.
Well, I think of like a submarine going down into a really deep area.
No, I said a 7-layer dip. We're going to go with that.
A what?
A 7-layer dip, just like that. The beans, they're the unsung heroes.
A what?
Ian, do you not know what a 7-layer dip
I
is?
think this is an American thing.
I had a very sheltered childhood.
All right, moving along. John, a couple questions in the live chat about the 890 jump cargo issues. Is there any joy, anything to look forward to in Alpha 314 RE that?
Partial joy, I guess, is the answer there. So the bug is still there.
The answer to so many things. Partial joy.
The
Apocalyptic changes and partial joy.
yeah, that's my catchphrase now. The main cargo grid on the rear ramp is still not being detected by the cargo system because it's an item in an item. I think a few other ships have that issue, but it really impacts the 890 because that's its primary amount of cargo. So that's still unfortunately not fixed. But we have actually we found an issue with the cargo in the front hangar where it wasn't actually putting on as much as it was supposed to be putting in there. The cargo, we'd put the right numbers in, but there was a little bit of proxy geo from the hole clipping in and stopping like rows and rows being added to the front. So whilst you're not going to have the full amount, there is a small bump in what you can actually use in the 890 and 314. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I think maybe roughly double what it is at the moment.
Están preguntando si el 890 tiene el bug de la carga, va a ser que tengo el bug de la carga para la 314, y dice que sí, que todavía no está solucionado el tema, que no se puede utilizar la extensión de la bodega todavía. Y dice que bueno, que de todas maneras han arreglado un bug y parece que, aunque no se puede utilizar toda la extensión de la bodega, sí parece que la nave indica que va a tener el doble de carga de lo que tiene ahora.
Lost system highlights come to mind. You don't need an itemized list of everything, but
I got an itemized list from Luke and team.
If you want to.
Removing trespass zones from all underground facilities to planets. So you were no longer receiving crimes for EMPing or interdicting the ship that you're using. So basically, you were getting it off of yourself, or if you EMP'd, then you got a crime stat for yourself. Destroying a party member's empty vehicle will no longer result in a crime. We have updated the prison code interface or code entry interface and prevented it from resetting the code with incorrect attempts. Made a reduction in time to remove individual crimes when hacking. Crime for assaulting a security guard should no longer be given outside of a monitored zone. Knockouts will no longer kill. Fixed an issue where the players were receiving a crime stat for shooting a vehicle as it was destroyed, and then fixed an issue when falling into lower sections of prisons that would count as a escape attempt. And then the other big one that Luke said was basically adjusted splash damage. So in particular for like EMP and interdiction stuff, like if you've done more good than bad, then you shouldn't get penalized for it.
Right.
Están comentando un poco el tema de los cambios que parece que han hecho del crime stat, ¿no? Dice de que, bueno, pues ahora al disparar a una nave vacía no te va a dar crime stat. Si has hecho más bien que mal, pues al tener una intercepción o tirar una MP no te va a dar tampoco crime stat. Han corregido han corregido temas de la cárcel también, y el tema de que, bueno, cuando cuando tú aturdes a un jugador, pues será que lo aturdes de verdad, que ya no mata. O sea, han arreglado bastantes cosas, parece ser.
over 3,000 issues. So, and before that, another 3,000 issues. And now, again, with a lot of these things, we're creating them, as we're building the features and building the content,
Right.
and then trying to squash them as much as we possibly can. So, one of the ones that I want to basically fix is the zoom out on the star map. So making sure that when you start the star map, it's actually zoomed out versus zoomed in. Then from there, we're looking at trying to fix a lot of the AI issues, in particular, them standing on chairs. And the reason for that was it's not necessarily on the AI. It was basically the way that the actor was persistent, and so it would go to sleep when you zoomed out, and it's basically the AI would be unusable, and then as soon as
Han corregido un montón de... O sea, como 3.000 errores, dice. Entre ellos han tocado temas del Star Map pues, para el tema del zoom y tal, que haga el zoom correctamente. Vamos a ver qué tal funciona sobre Star Map. Parece que han corregido también el tema de que los NPCs no aparezcan sentados encima de las sillas. O sea, bueno, o sea, que se adapten correctamente, que parece ser que era un tema de la persistencia de actor. Y han corregido pues un montón de bugs que mejoran la calidad de vida del juego.
But being more strict like that, do you think that's likely to have an impact on when we go live?
When I say strict, it's basically calling out and saying, no, we have to fix this. So, from there, it really is a conversation with the directors and the teams. But all I can really do with a lot of this stuff is call it out and say, hey, same with Bayer or our player relations or player experience team, and as well as other directors and leads. And so we have that stuff called out, and then it's up to us to really go through and say, yeah, we can do this in this time, or this requires an underlying system to be fixed or adjusted.
Bueno, está comentando de que a la hora de corregir errores, pues tienen una conversación, ¿no? A nivel interno si tienen que corregir un bug o no. Lo que parece ser es que en la 3.14 mm, pues tiene pinta de que han corregido un montón de fallos del juego. Habrá que ver, ¿no? Aparte de lo que comentaba antes del tema del crime stat, que dice que han tocado bastantes cosas del código de cómo se da el crime stat, ¿no? O sea que muchos de los fallos que había antes parece que van a estar solucionados.
That people would not necessarily see or know. Same with the AI and a lot of the mission stuff too. Like there was a lot of rework that Elliot did, for some of the base missions. But again, the player might not necessarily see those. So some of it's just quality.
Claro, hay mucho trabajo también en retrabajo de misiones que el jugador puede que no vea, pero hay mucho trabajo en las misiones básicas que se han rehecho para corregir fallos que tenían.
What was the hardest challenge the art team faced when bringing Crusader to life as a gas giant? Let's do it for Crusader and for Orison, because those had to be two very different challenges.
All right. Turns out making a gas giant's hard, right? Yeah. Well, let's see. So we started off by seeing how far we could get with the current tech. I think the last time I spoke with you, Jared, we was like, okay, we'll see what we can do. Abuse the rules, see what we can happen. I think we got pretty far. We showed it to Chris, and Chris was like, nope, we're missing the volumetric clouds, right? So, the focus then turned into the volumetric clouds. But whenever you create something for the first time, it's always hard because it's the first thing. You've got to go through that process of trial and error. So, with something like the gas giant, instantly the scale was the hardest part. And for example, like the radius of Crusader was, I think it's about 7,500 kilometers radius, right? And for example, like Stanton 1's like 1,000, or one of the moons is maybe 300. So it's it's considerably larger. So with that scale, and when the
Bueno, está preguntándole cuáles eran los retos de hacer Crusader, ¿no? Dice que bueno, que cuando enseñaron la primera versión que tenían de Crusader a Chris Roberts dijo que no, que eso no servía, que necesitaban las 9 volumétricas, así que se centraron en las 9 volumétricas. Y bueno, que siempre que haces algo nuevo, pues es que tecnología núcleo, ¿no? Pues es duro. Y además, en el caso de Crusader, estamos hablando de que tiene 7500 de radio. 7500 de radio. Ojo.
fantastic job as our principal tech artist of being that communicator between the art team and the tech team, and translating what features we'd need and how the tech works. So like I said, there's a lot of trial and error there. But then, once you start doing look development, you start getting something. But there was one day, okay, it was like, cool, this is working. And then Jake, who's previously been responsible for the previous space in the gas pockets and stuff in the game right now, and he just had a little play, right? He just was very curious. He took the tech and then he tried something out, and then instantly it was like, that's Crusader. He hit it. The man was talking about the layer in. He just tried something out, and we all looked at it. Was like, that's fantastic. So Seb kind of took it from there and stabilized it, but it was a quite a difficult journey just because it was the first thing for the game, and it's brand new tech, right? So I kind of see it where where we are, where we were a few years back in terms of planets. If you look at how they've developed and grown and increased in fidelity, it might maybe give a good example of where we are right now with this new bit of tech. And then for Horizon, this is a classic example of taking a concept art that you look of and go, oh, that's just going to be the best. That's the best. Like, Horizon was always my favorite of the Stanton locations. Or like, I fell in love with Horizon a long time ago. I looked at the concept art, and guess what? We put that block out in game, and it was like, this looks horrible. Horrible. Turns out a floating lattice work in the sky with thin struts doesn't translate well from concept art to game. So it tested us as a team. It tested us.
Me está comentando de que con respecto a, bueno, a la tecnología planetaria, que con el tema de Crusader, pues podemos ver dónde estamos ahora, dice, hemos avanzado mucho, ¿no? Con respecto a cómo estábamos al principio. En unos pocos años, pues la tecnología planetaria ha incrementado muchísimo su fidelidad. Y comenta que para Horizon, bueno, pues que era uno de sus lugares favoritos ya desde que empezó el proyecto de Stanton, ¿no? Cuando vio el arte de Horizon le encantó, ¿no? Y comenta que al principio, cuando empezaron a hacer Horizon, pues y empezaron a poner los blockouts, ¿no? Lo que es la vista previa, por así decirlo, pues que era un truño, que no representaba para nada lo que era el arte, no se plasmaba bien, no se traducía bien las sensaciones y tal. Así que tuvieron que trabajar muy duro, y que fue realmente un reto y un gran esfuerzo en conjunto para el equipo el sacar lo que hay ahora.
Let's see. Does the missile operator mode, along with the guidance and control rework, mean that co-pilots are going to be able to aim and fire missiles in any or all of the ships in 314? What's the extent of this? I also understand that capacitors have changed a little bit since we talked about them in ISC, so maybe we want to jump into that as well.
Yeah. So missile-wise, the intent is, yes, that co-pilots can use them. Certainly, from my testing personally in the Ibukati one, there are plenty of ships there that pilot can be flying along using guns, co-pilot can be there using missiles. So that really, probably for the first time, gives co-pilots something to do rather than just being sat there and looking.
Están comentando sobre el operador de misiles que efectivamente para la 3.14 habrá pues por fin el copiloto tendrá algo que hacer en muchas de las naves y podrá disparar los misiles mientras el piloto se dedica a pilotar y disparar las armas.
They go into missile operating mode outside of the pilot and trade sort of control of these things. To sort of touch on the ninja changes question as well earlier, people look at the missile operating mode is just a way to control missiles, capacitors, or it's just an extra layer. Those things have necessitated us to change and rebalance every single missile in the game, every single weapon in the game, all the ammo counts for every weapon, every single shield, the default loadouts for every ship, the hit points for every ship, the maneuverability of every ship. So they are huge, wide-reaching changes. So 314 is going to be a vastly different combat landscape to 313, and obviously with things of that magnitude, they are going to be iterated on in future patches because we're not going to get the balance right out the gate for the magnitude of ships and component possibilities.
Bueno, dice que también que con el tema de los condensadores se han modificado, o sea, con la introducción de los condensadores se han modificado la cantidad de munición que tienen las armas, el cómo funcionan los escudos, la cantidad de vida que tienen todas las naves, que es un cambio brutal y que va a cambiar por completo el panorama del combate.
Because there's obviously only so many of us, there's only so many QA, things will slip through, you guys.
Y también el hecho de que, bueno, de que realmente, pues, con la de cambios que hay, pues, todavía no está todo, o sea, que no esperemos que esté todo súper equilibrado o bien balanceado todavía, porque hay muchísimos cambios, ¿no? Pero definitivamente pues, sí que hay muchos cambios con respecto al parche anterior. Va a ser, en cuanto al combate, un parche totalmente nuevo.
Matt, now what can people expect when this shows up on PTU?
So fundamentally, the base system is still there. Capacitors are a thing. We haven't got rid of them. They are there. But in the review process, we sort of looked at it all and went, capacitors are really just the new bit that's been added. What you're actually doing now is you are managing your power and your energy. Anyone that's sort of familiar with real world plane dogfighting or sim dogfighting, you know it's all about energy conservation and using that to your advantage. So what we've done is, rather than capacitors be this separate entity, we've merged them into the power triangle. So the power triangle in previous patches never quite worked how we wanted it to work or how players thought it worked. So to give a very simple, quick answer for that, all the items on your ship wanted X amount of power. So the power plant would go fill them all up as much as it could first, based on a completely separate priority list to what's on the power triangle. And then the power triangle would dictate what's left over. So if your items had all the power they needed, moving the power triangle around did nothing for them anyway. It was sort of just a false advertising on you pushed auto thrusters, but if your thrusters had enough power anyway, it made no difference. That is completely gone now. So the power triangle in 314 directly controls the capacitor assignment. So you are dictating where this capacitor is expending the energy available to it. So if you put it in the middle, so if you want to play the game without capacitors at all, you can. You don't have to manage it. You can just leave it alone, fly as you did in 313. You'll still be able to partake in combat and do things. But if you come across someone who's actively managing it, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So it's there for giving players extra depth. And I can't remember what we showed in the ISC a while back about it, but
Está comentando un poco de que los condensadores, lo que han hecho ha sido como la tecnología de condensadores que han puesto se funde un poco con lo que es el triángulo de poder, que antes no tenía un uso claro, o sea, no funcionaba. Entonces, lo que han hecho es que distribuir, o sea, digamos que la nave tiene componentes. Esos componentes siempre demandan por un poco más de energía y los condensadores lo que hacen es distribuir hacia donde quieren completar la energía que demandan pues los ciertos componentes de la nave, ya sean armas, impulsores, etcétera, ¿no? Entonces, vamos a poder jugar perfectamente sin utilizar eso, pero si nosotros nos enfrentamos a un combate contra una persona que esté utilizando el manejo de los condensadores, o sea, modificando el triángulo de poder, pues nos encontraremos en desventaja.
Pause for a second, then regenerate, and the capacitor itself controls the speed of that regeneration. You can also turn on and off your energy weapons to increase the pool available to your energy weapons. So a good example would be, say, the Super Hornet, which has a lot of guns on it by default. At the moment, that will split the capacitor between all those weapons. So if you turn a few off, the ones that are left will have more and also recharge quicker. So you've got some trade-offs to make there. And then the last one is shields, and shields sort of behave how they did previously because they had that behavior built in where they would go down, pause, recharge, go back up again. But what we've done in addition to that, aside from all the rebalancing of the numbers, is all the fighters have bubble shields, which is something we used to have pre-Alpha 3.0. So you, rather than having 4 faces on your shield system, it is one all-encompassing shield face. So no matter what direction you are being hit from, it's all getting hit on one face essentially. And then larger ships have the 4 faces, so you can manage your.
Claro, esto es importante porque está diciendo que ahora las naves pequeñas van a tener un escudo burbuja. En vez de tener 4 divididos, solo las naves grandes tendrán 4 diferentes escudos.
And put it onto you're managing the whole system of power.
Y además también nos comenta de que, por ejemplo, en el caso de un Super Hornet que tiene bastantes armas, si nosotros apagamos parte de esas armas, los condensadores potenciarán, o las armas restantes se aprovecharán de la potencia restante, por lo tanto, si nosotros tenemos 4 y apagamos 2, pues esas 2 armas que quedan tendrán más potencia de fuego que si tuviéramos las 4 activadas. No significa que esas 2 solas tengan más potencia que las 4, pero sí que desempeñarán, si apagamos, desempeñarán más esas 2 armas en concreto, ¿no?
Shields, there's a lot of fun things there.
Cool. There's a question in chat. Jared, can you make John Crew laugh? When are we getting the? How about that Orison shuttle, John?
Oh, that's not going to make me laugh. That's just going to make me angry.
Well, we're finally getting it, John. Yeah.
That's what I just heard.
I talked to the artist who did it, and he was not up for making it on the vehicle team.
I've got a John had a great ninja, ninja commit in for 314. I've got a slightly better one. A new high-tech payment terminal. You know, the Fine terminal? It's coming.
I covered that on ISC. I covered that in a sprint report.
Una cosa importante que ha dicho antes, que casi se me olvidó comentar. Todd había comentado que en el caso del crime stat, los crímenes individuales van a ser más rápidos de quitar en las consolas ahora.
Is there any benefit to surrendering to law enforcement, such as like reduced sentencing or anything? Why would you want to surrender as opposed to just fighting to the death?
It's basically laying the framework in the future. Now, no,
Hay alguna ventaja en rendirse ahora mismo y dice que no hay ninguna ventaja, simplemente es algo que está ahí para el futuro, porque si el futuro palmas, pues la cagaste, ¿no?
It's not there yet.
Okay. Will radar scanning and ping be affected by things like asteroids, terrain, or other obstructions?
So with the ping, it's really going to be affected off of the EM and IR. So if you have the EM, so if we took, let's say, Yella's asteroid ring or something like that, and there was a fair amount of EM or IR being put out of those, then the ship could basically hide in those because it's creating a large enough ambient signature for the ship to be able to hide in or hide behind kind of thing. So it will really depend on how we set up our our celestial bodies. But as far as just pure terrain, no.
Okay.
The masking side as well.
Bueno, el escáner y el ping se verán modificados por si nos podemos esconder detrás de algo y demás. Dice que de momento lo que hay es que dice que no, que realmente lo que sí que hay es que depende del... Joder, la suciedad del ambiente, vamos a decirlo así, según cómo configuren ellos los cuerpos celestiales, pues, es decir, si estás en un campo de asteroides de hielo, por ejemplo, pues el ambiente pues enturbiará más lo que son las señales y eso ayudará a que a las naves se puedan ocultar mejor ahí, ¿no?
Play coming from those systems as well outside, and then obviously environments stack on top of that, so that's all amplified, or whatever the reverse of amplified is, in a gas cloud where everything is harder. So going into a gas cloud, you're no longer the case where you're going to be locked on the enemy's targeting. You'll probably lose that lock because they won't be able to actually keep their signals high enough to track you.
One more question for Todd before we move on. If we did add the Orison shuttle as a player controllable vehicle, Todd, how would you imagine it be used in the verse?
It's super combat heavy. It's troop deploy, kind of thing. But instead of dropping them off, it just crashes.
Ian, what did not make it into the first iteration of Crusader that you still want to implement in some later iteration?
For Crusader or Crusader on Orison?
Let's do Crusader and Orison. They only said Crusader, but let's do both.
Okay. Well, let's see. Probably the biggest one is probably movement. See, I always wanted this feeling like it's like an evolving landscape, and we always talked about the idea that.
Bueno, ¿qué cosas no habéis logrado introducir ahora en la 3.14 que queréis introducir? El tema de las nubes que tengan movimiento, que sean dinámicas, que todavía no hemos metido eso, ¿no?
Like an adaptation of that tech. So,
por cierto, hablando de nubes, estaba comentando algo de John Crew, que bueno, no me ha dado tiempo a escucharlo perfecto, pero creo que ha dicho algo de que está relacionado con la ocultación de tu nave y las nubes de gases, que parece ser que tiene pues que tiene importancia. Habrá que verlo, a ver.
Crazy drops of tech like this, obviously, it takes years, right? It usually takes years, and it's very rare that people get to see tech so early in development. So quality and performance, seeing those two increases, obviously, will be coming in soon. Also, lighting and player interaction, more complexity there. So like I said, the analogy I gave for the gas giant, it's the first one. We're going to have many more gas giants in the game, but we'll see this improve. So it's going to hopefully follow a similar sort of like evolution format of what we've been doing with our planets.
Yeah.
Que además está comentando de que, pues, evidentemente lo que vamos a ver ahora pues es una primera iteración y bueno, pues que el rendimiento irá mejorando, que es algo extraño, ¿no? Que la gente pues tenga la oportunidad de ver algo en un desarrollo tan temprano, en el mundo de los videojuegos se refiere, y que en el futuro pues también habrá más gigantes de gas, no será el único, y que entonces ahí veremos claramente cómo va mejorando la tecnología, ¿no?
Eventually, that will be released with basically the gas giants.
Ian, you bring up a really good point I want to touch on about how with Star Citizen, one of the things that separates us from almost every other project out there is how early people tend to see things in the development process, and we show a lot, far more than anybody else, but we still work to hold things back and preserve things when possible. All this quarter, Reddit, Spectrum, YouTube comments have been like, show us the clouds, show us Orison, and like we've been holding that back specifically for.
Claro, está comentando de que bueno, está comentando de que Star Citizen pues se tiene la oportunidad, que es un proyecto especial porque se tiene la oportunidad de ver cosas en un desarrollo temprano, pero también se manejan el hecho de poder guardarse cosas, y el ejemplo lo tenemos en el ISC que hemos visto ayer, para poder preservar esa wow experiencia de sorpresa, ¿no? Dice wow experience.
Always balancing between showing everything at the early.
Claro, dice que siempre que todo está en el equilibrio entre balancear el enseñarlo todo o el que todavía haya pues sorpresas para los jugadores cuando salgan los parches o cuando salga el contenido, ¿no?
People who wish we would show more and show it earlier, and there's always people that would wish we didn't show and let them discover it in the game. And it's always a balance. All right, one more question. If we did add the Orison shuttle, if Orison suffers a power failure, will it fall into the planet's core, or will it be fully buoyant? Not only did somebody ask this, it got voted up. Who wants to take it?
Basically, it would sink. I mean, that's the idea, is that anything there will sink.
Okay. Will we see in-game whales flying around Orison?
Not for 314. Basically, Character has been working on them, but basically the downstream teams like AI, animation, design still need time to do what they need to do in order to make them work properly.
¿Qué pasará si una nave o lo que sea va al centro del planeta? Pues se hundirá. ¿Qué pasará si... O sea, ¿qué pasa con las ballenas? Las ballenas, pues después de la 314, el equipo está trabajando en eso, pero todavía queda mandanga. O sea, que de momento no.
Altering my audio levels. I can't troubleshoot it live during the show. Sorry, guys. But letting you know, you can stop mentioning it in chat.
Mic.
We haven't changed it or touched it once during the show. It is varying on its own. I'll look into it afterwards. John, is there going to be a difference in power management, capacitor management between single-seater and multi-crew ships, either in 314 or beyond?
In 314, no. It is the same interaction, managing it via the triangle between small and large ships. However, it's not like one item across all the ships. Every ship has its own set of capacitors. So for 314, we're not letting you change them, but we do want to do that in the future, so you can sort of upgrade them and have some pros and cons. But for small and large ships, it is the same system. It does have varying different things based on the size of the ship, just because some ships multi-crew ships tend to have more things on them, so adjusting it will have a different experience, but the core interaction is the same. And down the line, when we have like multi-crew and capital ships, then I would expect those larger ships to not really deal with the capacitors too much, because it'll be a more in-depth engineer turning systems on and off rather than moving a triangle around.
Gotcha. A couple questions.
Está comentando de si pues el tema de los condensadores, que para naves capitales en el futuro
a ship. Right now, other players appear to just be looking at blank or placeholder screens that don't reflect the status of the ship. I know this is not only important for immersion, but it's also really all the machinima makers really want this. So,
yeah, you should be able to see the HUD, because that is a new system done with building blocks. You won't be able to see the MFDs because they are still sort of flash scaleform based, so they are turned off intentionally as a performance.
Bueno, estaba comentando el tema de los condensadores antes, de que las naves capitales pues tendrá como en el futuro un manejo diferente, pues como que más tareas dedicadas de ingeniero, en plan de otro tipo de asunto, más que de mover el triangulito para arriba y para abajo. pero esto de cara al futuro, y que las naves pequeñas, medianas, pues sí tendrán ese sistema de triángulo, aunque sí que tienen diferentes componentes, diferentes condensadores, que en el futuro se podrán toquetear un poco más, ¿no?
Right now.
Not in 314. So in 314 we've put what we call the generic HUD across all the ships, and that has a manufacturer influenced color scheme on it, and I think we've shown on ISE the Aegis styled one and options for the Drake one. So in time, those manufacturer ships will have that sort of style applied to them, and all the other manufacturers will get there. And then once we've done that, then we'll look into.
Claro, está comentando de que de momento el HUD va a ser lo mismo para todas las naves y que en el futuro, pues sí, habrá HUDs propietarios de fabricantes, pero es un TM.
Support for the HUD as a whole. So that level of it will be included at some point.
For Ian or anybody, I guess, how do you expect Crusader and Orison to evolve through later patches? We've talked about improvements to the clouds.
¿Cómo esperáis que Crusader evolucione en futuros parches?
Landing zones have grown, like the first version of Lorville, and then we had the CBD later on. Same with Microtech and stuff. How do we? What's the roadmap look like in general for Crusader and Orison?
You want to take it, Todd, or do you want me to go?
I'm fine with taking it. So basically, with V2, we have a fair amount. We have three different shops that we're focusing on, and then we've got a thruster experience. We've got like a whale tour experience that will happen as we roll out. But the whale tour obviously won't be turned on until we actually have the whales. Otherwise, it's going to be a really crappy tour. Then we have things like building interior stuff that some of the Montreal guys are working on, which
Dice que, bueno, que las tres cosas que hay así importantes de cara al futuro sería el tema de las ballenas, el tema de los interiores de los edificios y la otra que me he olvidado, me cago en la leche.
within major landing zones that just aren't, hey, go deliver this fruit, to the person over here kind of thing. But that's really kind of one of the mandates that the Montreal guys are working towards right now.
Dice que los chavales de Montreal que están trabajando en el tema de los interiores de edificios y demás. Y también está hablando de misiones de, por ejemplo, de entregarle una fruta a no sé qué tipo y tal, o sea, misiones de ese estilo que va a haber.
And whether it be repair or, clear out or take over, that kind of stuff. So attack and defend. And then the other thing is that the barges that were created, being able to do combat on those or being able to do missions on those or another.
Claro, que puede ser misiones, las misiones de los edificios que están haciendo pueden ser misiones de combate, misiones de reparación, diferentes misiones que va a haber en esos interiores de edificios que está haciendo el equipo de Montreal.
About additional POIs besides Orison on Crusader? Is there anything else on Orison, or did Crusader just build Orison on Crusader and then stop there?
So the focus is exclusively on Orison. That's like the major landing zone on that gas giant. But what's interesting, right, is we remember what I said right back at the beginning, like building Orison was hard. It came with its own challenges where on previous LZs, you had terrain for the player to land on and get out and, experience the location. Whereas, we didn't really have that option there. So right from the very early stages, we were like, and it's kind of like listening to the community as well. It's like, they don't want restricted areas. They want to make those decisions. So right from the get-go, we're like, how do we make this so it is almost exclusively open for the player? So when you look around Orison, the entire stretching of it, I think there's 2 restricted areas, and they're around the commercial area and the industrial platform, just because the social space is right. Is to stop griefing.
Dice que hay solo 2 zonas de restricción en lo que es Horizon. y que quieren, que bueno, que a diferencia de otras ubicaciones donde el jugador podía aterrizar donde quisiera y poder tener la perspectiva del lugar, aquí de momento solo están centrados en las plataformas de la zona principal de aterrizaje y que solo tendría restricciones eso, en la zona industrial y en la zona comercial, porque serían las zonas, digamos, donde se va para prevenir el grifeo, ¿no?
Already made, right? And and if when people do get to fly around Orzen, one of the reads I really wanted is I want to be out on a lonely platform in the middle of nowhere. So it feels like if you think about how big this guy would be compared to other LZs, like you could be on an industrial platform way out in the distance, and it would feel like you're looking at Orzen in the distance, if you know what I mean. It was an early look we wanted to achieve. So
Claro, dice que una de las cosas que querían conseguir es que si, por ejemplo, estás en una plataforma industrial y miras al resto de Horizon, pues que vas a ver la inmensidad de la zona, ¿no? Que era una de las sensaciones que querían conseguir, que puedas ver las otras plataformas a la distancia y ver la grandeza, ¿no? De la zona de aterrizaje.
Complete opposite sides of the planet, so on and so forth. So those are things that we will be looking into and trying out. But like Ian said, we have the base now, for these things to be built off of.
One thing I didn't say before, Todd gave a very serious answer about what didn't make Horizon, but we didn't get the golf course. Maybe if it gets enough requests, maybe one day.
I'll happily sacrifice the shuttle for the golf course.
I was gonna say I didn't do that one. That wasn't on me. Ian did that one. John, with all the work that's gone into.
Creo que están bromeando sobre tener un campo de golf o algo así, me parece. No estoy seguro. De que querían conseguir tener un campo de golf o algo así. Bueno, que para hacer estructuras, pues que ya tienen la base, porque tienen la zona de aterrizaje, ¿no? Hecha, y que en el futuro pues estará la posibilidad de poder poner otras estructuras, ¿no? en Horizon.
Separate, divorced from that.
I'd say it's a step towards it. In 3.14, we're not specifically focusing on those ships having their superior radar and scanning abilities. Our focus is getting all the ships working to a state where we're happy with this new system, and from then on we will start.
Bueno, con respecto al escaneo y al no radar y ping, ¿no? Que no va a haber especializaciones en naves por ahora, que simplemente ahora pues todo es un sistema unificado y cuando todo eso funcione bien pues ya se especializarán, ¿no? O dedicarán o ya pues irán por ramas, ¿no?
Because we missed it, so we're doing the big wide pass, like Todd said. We've done our first pass on all the systems last week, and every 3 or 4 days we're sort of doing the next iterative pass based on internal and Ivakati feedback on each of those big systems. So one day we might have the next step tunings for the missiles GUI, and the next day might be the armor and health. The next day is the scanning values. So it's coming thick and fast.
Todd, I don't know if you'll have anything for us, but it's come up too often in chat for me to ignore it. Positional desync. It's been a pretty major problem for a while now, but now for 3.13.
Yeah. La sincronización posicional ya ha sido un problema y tal. ¿Qué pasa con eso, no?
And what hope, if any, do we have that some of this might be resolved in 3.14?
I mean, part of it is basically server frame rate, and then part of it is just how much entity counts I think we have and all this stuff. So from my standpoint, I think Clive and his team have constantly been trying to fix those types of things, and then same with Gordon and his team from an actor side. So this is something that's we know is plaguing our game, and we know that it in particular was Xenothreat and everything, like the big capital ships. It exacerbates it, So obviously with Ninetales, it's a little bit smaller and doesn't have as many of the big capital ships in it. So
En el evento de la Sinothread con las naves capitales es algo que se exagera un poco el tema del desync y con el Line Tiles of Down, que es algo que se nota menos. Pero parte del problema ahora mismo es el frame rate de los servidores y que pues tienen tanto equipos como Clay y Gordo, ¿no? Que son gente que trabaja en equipos, porque trabajan en equipo de actores y tal, y que es algo que están intentando constantemente corregir, pero bueno, que lo que parece indicar es que de momento, pues debido al rendimiento de los servidores, pues que nos vamos a tener que comer ese desync posicional, ¿no?
Cool AI behaviors, locally, internally in development, and then it gets into the live, and the I don't know. Partially for what the reason you mentioned earlier with the streaming and the missing persistence, but also just the server tick rate. Yeah, it's just we can't stop developing. Like we have to keep building the game. While this is being worked on by the dedicated teams who are working on this. I know in the chats or in comments there's often this perception that you can only work on one thing at a time and everybody should be working on this. It's like, Ian, you should be working on server desync. What are you doing? You environment art director. It's like, why aren't you working on server desync? It's like we still need to be developing the game and building our systems and adding new features to the game. But it can be challenging when we want this fixed as much as the players do. I don't think that's a big mystery. All right, we are almost out of time. Ian, what's going on with Port Olisar? It's like the number two
Nothing
question
at
in the
all.
chat. The number two question in
Nothing
chat
at
has
all.
been about Port Olisar.
Nothing at all.
People want it to be moved. People want it to be a crashed derelict on a planet.
¿Qué pasa con Port Olisar? Hay gente que quiere que sea un desastre en un planeta, que sea... dice que se ha movido. ¿Qué va a pasar con Port Olisar?
Port Olisar has a special place in my heart. We built it back in the day. Whatever we do with it will be fitting. It's just not going to disappear. I'll just leave it there.
Bueno, dice que Port Olisar tiene un lugar especial en mi corazón. Cualquier cosa que hagamos no va a desaparecer, pero encajará, ¿no?
No, what would it take to get it?
You only have one of them, Olisar or that shuttle.
I think you should just do a flying Alisar.
A player-controlled Olisar.
Just the cockpit in there, yeah.
Poner un Olisar controlable con un cockpit y todo.
That for stealing that parking meter behind him?
Nope, I bought it.
You bought a parking meter?
Yeah, it's a good talking piece. Well, and then my wife's got all of her Lego stuff as well, so.
We've got a couple here. We got a couple more Ninetales lockdown questions. So, will the Ninetales phases run on all servers simultaneously, like at the same time, or will each have its own scenario? I know there's been a lot of comments I've seen about folks in Australia or folks outside the Pacific time zones or the Austin time zones. Like, will these ever run in times that I can play, and stuff like that?
I mean, it as far as I know, they're running across all servers simultaneously. And then basically it does have a time clock that it just reoccurs. And so...
Dice, ¿el evento del bloqueo Ninetales ocurrirá en todos los servidores a la vez o será independiente a cada servidor? Y dice que básicamente pues tiene un tiempo, un temporizador y hará que salten todos los servidores a la vez.
Reoccur multiple times throughout the day, because technically we think of our days in game as basically 3 to 4 hours. I think it's 3 hours that we look as kind of a 24-hour period. So we want to make sure that all players can experience this across the board.
Que además dice que va a haber varias veces al día y que se supone que los días en el juego tienen una duración de 3 a 4 horas. Y que quieren estar seguros de que todos los diferentes usos horarios de los jugadores pues tengan oportunidad de poder probar el evento.
Balls. I don't know if Ian even knows about the Pico balls. That was something I worked out with Eddie. Ian, do you know about the Pico balls?
What about them?
Do you know where they're at?
I know they're in.
Okay.
Están
People still haven't
preguntando,
found them. I've been waiting.
están preguntando sobre las bolas pico estas, las pico balls, que es las pelotitas estas que están por el...
Nick was working on it, but he went on paternity, so I don't know. I'd have
Yeah.
to wait. All right, guys, that's it. That's our show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this. I have to give a little extra special thank you for John Crew because he was a last-minute add-in there. So thank you for moving your schedule around and jumping in. There are people I can count on in this place, and these are three of my absolute favorites. ISC is on hiatus, everybody. We're off. We're not back again until July 20-something or other. So you can just keep watching the old episodes over and over again if you want. We'll be back next Friday with an episode of Calling All Devs with core gameplay director Richard Tyrer. We're going to talk all about player healing and hacking and all kinds of stuff coming in Alpha through 15. So stay tuned for that. And of course, remember to keep checking up on the robertspaceindustries.com website. That's because that's where all the information about when 314 moves to PTU and what wave and when you can get in and you can start flying around Horizon for yourself because it is quite a treat. So Ian, Todd, John, thank you so much. I'm Jared. I'll talk to you later, everybody. See ya. Bye. Which one does this? It's that one.
Ciao, guys.
Bye.
My hand started working again right towards the end.
Bueno, pues al final lo que han comentado un poco es el hecho de que sí que hay bolas de pico por ahí en algún sitio que están para encontrar y que el próximo viernes se cuece. Porque el próximo viernes va a haber un Calling All Devs sobre lo que está por llegar en la 3.15, sobre medicina y hackeo. Ojo, cuidado, chavales, que el próximo viernes se cuece. Que no hay inside hasta el 20 y pico de julio, pero... Ese Calling All Devs, joder. Ese pedazo Calling All Devs que vamos a tener la semana que viene se va a cocer. Y que estemos atentos a la web para cuando salga pues las oleadas del parche y tal. Y yo lo que voy a hacer es una cosa, chavales. O sea, ayer me acosté un pelín tarde porque estuve arreglando cosas y demás en el PC y demás. Y me he levantado 5 minutos antes de poder hacer el Star Citizen Live. Así que lo que voy a hacer va a ser dejar aquí un poquito esto y me voy a ir a por un café abajo y ese tipo de cosas. Y buenas a todos, por cierto. Buenas Faibo, Monkey, Pekafry, Zorro, Raxia. Que por cierto, Raxia, que tú te habías suscrito el otro día y no te pude darle las gracias, me parece, porque no me saltó la notificación. Sí, gracias por la suscripción. Buenas, Drew. Algo importante. Tú eres importante, joder. Tío Rufo también está por ahí. Sargentovic. Frankie. Y creo que no se me olvida nadie. Y si se me olvida alguien, pues... Huesillo, creo que está también por ahí. Locus. Bueno, que nos vemos en un ratito, ¿vale? Porque soy un ser humano y necesito recargar pilas. Así que voy a por ese cafecillo abajo y no tardo, ¿no? No tardo. A ver, un momentito. Sí, tío, necesito ese café para ser persona, ¿eh? Y... ¿Y qué le puedo poner? A ver, antes de pirar, a ver. Espera. Está complicado encontrar, ¿eh? No, esto no me convence tampoco. Esto tampoco. Esto puede que sí. A ver si hago así. Ojo, cuidado, ¿eh? Ahí sí. Ahí estamos de acuerdo. Se entiende, ¿no? Lo que estoy haciendo. Vale, pues ahí vengo. Nos vemos ahora, chicos.